What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our rapidly growing YouTube channel, just hit 11,000 subscribers, which is pretty cool, too. By the way, I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me for this podcast, a guy that I don't team up with on podcast too often, but looking forward to it nonetheless, David Sisk. For those who don't know, he's our director of basketball recruiting. He's also an analyst for us as well over here at TarHeelIllustrated.com. And David, we're here for a bit of a fun podcast, I think. Going to be talking about, obviously, the news that's become official now with Caleb Love finally solidifying the fact that he's going to return to the Tar Heels for his junior season. Four of Carolina's Iron Five, for lack of a better word, have announced that they will return to North Carolina next season, that being Armando Bacot, RJ Davis, Leaky Black, and, like I mentioned earlier, Caleb Love. So fun topic here. Looking forward to kind of chatting with you about it. Before we dive into that, though, I want to go ahead and shout out our sponsor in this one, NIL Fanbox. Fantastic company doing some really, really cool things. So, guys, here's a spiel. For as little as $9.95 a month, UNC sports fans, so everybody listening on this podcast right now, can now receive officially licensed, authentic autographed memorabilia from their favorite UNC men's and women's basketball players. It's getting ready to grow to all sports at Carolina right now. They're also partnered with the University of North Carolina as well. So this is official stuff right here, delivered right to their front door. And in return, players earn money from their name, image, and likeness. All been cleared through compliance. Like I said, the NIL Fanbox has partnered with North Carolina as well. So it's a really, really awesome thing we're excited to be a part of as well. If you guys want to sign up for that, just click the link in the description to order your Tar Heel Fanbox and use the promo code HEELS22 to save 10% on your order. Again, just click the link below and use that promo code HEELS22 to save. All right, David, let's go ahead and dive into this one, man. And here's where I want to start with it. And I'll every time it seems like me and AJ do a podcast, which is pretty often, I like to kind of just get the initial reactions out of something. So I kind of just want to ask you about that. With the news being solidified, like I mentioned, that Caleb Love was kind of the last piece of the puzzle, for lack of a better word, on the returning guys that Carolina fans were hoping would come back, with him now being official after Sunday's news. What are your just kind of initial thoughts on the fact that Carolina's getting four of those five starters back from last year's team that was, 15-point lead at halftime of the national championship game, not too far away from winning a national championship? I know it's something Carolina fans are just ecstatic about right now.
Yeah, and I really don't. I'm really not surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I think we expected all these guys back. I think NIL has changed things, and I think now there's a possibility, if you're at the right place, even if you're projected a first-round pick, that monetarily it may not make sense to go professional, even with a guaranteed contract. You can always get your stock up. But like I said, NIL has changed things now where players are able to bottom line, make money playing college basketball. And that's happening in a lot of places. I think here, all of that goes for North Carolina, but here you didn't see any of these guys really with those first round looks or in that upper half of the first round. A lot of second rounders. I think we all think Bacot can somewhere find a spot in the NBA. And you look at Caleb Love, probably one of the highest draft ceiling, but he's got a chance to really up that next year. So I don't know exactly where he could have gone, but there might have been a chance he could have snuck in high end or the bottom end of the first round.
Mm-hmm. I saw some projections that kind of had him in there, maybe early second round guy too. So it wasn't super high draft pick.
Probably a second round pick, and you got no guaranteed. So here's the thing: in the world of basketball, do you go into the second round and say, okay, I'm going to try it? Well, no guarantee. There's no guaranteed contracts. There's no guaranteed roster spots. There's none of that. Or do I go back to North Carolina and I can do a couple of things? Number one, I can compete for a national championship, an ACC championship, can really up, if we're looking at it individually now, can really up their brand. That's the thing about college basketball. College basketball can brand in a way that the G League and the Overtime League and internationally and all those other places can't do. So it gives them that opportunity, gives them a chance to show. I still think there's a place for winners in professional sports. If you win, I think there's general managers out there and coaches out there in the NBA that want to have somebody that's a part of that. But I think most importantly, like we said, North Carolina, they're all coming back. North Carolina has a shot to make a great run next year. And in the end, in the long run, that's the important thing if you're a Tar Heel fan.
No, I agree. And I think when you look at the four, you kind of have RJ and Leaky, who I think everybody, for lack of a better word, kind of expected to come back. There was even kind of hints during press conferences in regards to Leaky Black in particular, with things that he said during the season that made it pretty evident that he was going to return. And you talked about, kind of draft boards. RJ was never a guy that I think when most people expected when RJ came in to kind of be a 4-year guy. It looks like he probably will be that. He's not a guy that's super high on any draft boards. Now, if you win a national championship, that can change very quickly. And that's when you kind of see some mass exodus, for lack of a better word, with guys on the bubble. But I think looking at Armando and Caleb in particular, those were the guys, like you talked about, that were kind of the head of the NBA draft prospects. I know they're not super high prospects, but out of the guys in Carolina right now, those were the guys that had to make a decision. They had to say, okay, do I want to come back to college with NIL, with the fact that, this is a team that could contend for a national championship with RJ and Leaky coming back? Do I want to come back and do that instead of taking a risk, like you mentioned, and going to the NBA? Now, when you look at guys like Caleb and Armando, it seems to me that development's just the key for them to increasing their draft stock. When you look at how good Carolina can be next season, I think it's something that definitely will boost if they have the type of years, or even better, that they had this past season. So, Dave, I don't want to ask you, when you look at guys as a guy that's coached and all that jazz, when you look at guys like Caleb and Armando, I've said for a long time that I think the only thing Caleb really needs to improve on is his consistency. I think he's got everything else in his bag. I think he's shown glimpses that he can be that dominant offensive player in particular. The NBA just absolutely loves a guy that can really thrive in the spotlight of the NBA as well, but he just hasn't done it on a consistent enough basis. And I'm not talking game to game necessarily. We've seen glimpses when it's, great play 1 second, bad 2 plays the next second. That's something that's kind of followed Caleb Love around a little bit. For me, consistency is the key for him. Can he develop and be a more consistent player across the board? And I think, I'd be curious to know what your thought is on kind of Armando's development, because obviously in the NBA now, you want guys who can step out, regardless if you're big or not, can step out and hit shots. But if you're not going to be one of those guys, I still think there's places in the league for guys maybe not like that, who are rim protectors that can grab boards and do those kind of dirty work for you. So when you look at Caleb and Armando, David, what do you think they'll be looking to develop next season to increase that draft stock? Because like I said, they're going to be on a really good team that's got a chance to do some really nice things, which we'll hit on a little bit too.
Here's the thing that I think made it in the best interest for them to go back to school, is that they got a lot to work on, as far as the NBA goes. And I don't think it's one of those deals, well, they just, improve with experience. No, I think there's things out there that are obvious. I think with Caleb, you talk about consistency. Well, that comes from shot selection. So, and I think that got better as the year went. But Caleb at times can be a high volume 3-point shooter with a high degree of difficulty. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't really manifest itself with a high percentage of shooting. What Caleb needs to do is he has got to improve his 2-point percentage in mid-range and scoring at the rim. Until the Kansas game in the NCAA tournament, he looked like an entirely different player. He was hitting floaters, he was hitting runners, mid-range pull-ups, he was getting to the rim, scoring in different ways. That's what he's got to do. I think when I look at him, my book, the other thing in the book on Caleb would be he's got to have space to play in. Now, I don't think that's a big issue for the NBA, because the NBA is all about space. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he has to go prove, hey, if the space is not there, if we're running Carolina secondary set, there's 2 bigs down there that I can score on that. That's not a huge deal in the NBA, because they're not going to do that. So you've got space. What does he do with it? I don't think they want to look at guys that are going to take 28-footers, after he goes behind the back between the legs 3 times with a guy hanging all over him. I don't think that's what they're going to look at. He's the big thing that I see, and it's, to me, what turned the team around was that he was able to finish, like I said, in the mid-range and finish at the rim. Also, a few less, not forced as much, good shot selection, not as many turnovers, and that got better as the year went. So That's what he's got to do. He's just got to do a lot of things there based around decision making and based around execution and finishing inside the 3-point line. Armando, I think Armando, as the year went, I thought more and more played himself into shape. Now, some people may disagree with that, but I just thought defensively in the NCAA tournament, he was able to switch out sometimes on really good guards, and they couldn't get shots off on him. He blocked a lot of shots in the NCAA tournament once he switched on to really good perimeter players, and they tried to finish at the rim, make layups, make runners. And he had a number of blocked shots on that. So, coming in at that shape, maybe dropping a little bit of weight, but like you said, proving that he can play out on the floor a little bit more. Now, what role in the NBA, I don't know. There's not a big range of need in the NBA for fives or centers, as we'll call them, playing with their back to the bucket on the ball side, because it's all about playing in space, having an open post, getting to the rim. But what they like is the big that can play on a pick and roll. He's very good in the pick and roll. They like that. They want bigs who can run the floor in the NBA. I think he got much better at that in the year. We read some clips late in the season where he wasn't even in the screen when the ball crossed half court. He ended up at the rim. I think that's a huge issue. But being able, I think some rim protection, being able to switch, he's gotten better at that. But stepping on out, making that mid-range, he's pretty good out to about 15 feet. He doesn't have to make the three. I'd like to see him be able to stretch that shot out to about 18 to 20 feet and do those other things. And that is a work in progress physically, but I think he made an improvement at that last year as it went, and he just needs to continue that in 22, 23.
Agreed. It's going to be really interesting to see how they develop next season. And kind of to wrap up this portion of the podcast, I think it just makes a ton of sense that all four of these guys came back. Like I said, I know Armando and Caleb were the ones that really had to sit down and make a decision. Probably Caleb a little bit more so too. But I think with all these guys coming back, it just makes a ton of sense looking to the future. So, David, I want to kind of move the conversation on a little bit. And the second thing I kind of want to hit on this is kind of just a quick look ahead to next year's team. You got Armando, RJ, Leaky, and Caleb coming back. So far, as of the recording of this podcast, we're recording this on April 25th. Only Anthony Harris, Dawson Garcia, and Brady Manek have left the program. I know Dawson, some ways doesn't count, just been officially, left the program in January. It was kind of irrelevant towards, Carolina's national championship run. We got to throw him in there as well. Looking at the freshman class, you got Jalen Washington, Seth Trimble, and Tyler Nickel. You also have Will Shaver, who reclassified and was in Chapel Hill, on the bench for the second half of the season for the Tar Heels. Didn't get any playing time, but has been there, but is still a part of that class. So when you look at those guys, obviously Brady Manek's the outlier. And I put a tweet out. This is where I want to take this conversation. I put a tweet out when Caleb announced that he was coming back. And I said, for me, it's national championship or bust. I think a lot of Carolina fans are kind of thinking the same way. I know it's super, super early to be saying that, but you look at what this team returns and the talent that they return, and you look at what they did to finish last year, I think they're going to be national championship favorites, and a team that, could likely be ranked number one in the country going into the season will definitely be ranked in the top 5 going into next season. So I think that's legitimate kind of a stated goal for them going into next year. So with Manek, a lot of Carolina fans kind of responded to the tweet, and most of them agreed that Carolina was a national championship or bust kind of contender next year. But a lot of people brought up a point of replacing Manek, and I think that's something that a lot of Carolina fans are kind of interested and worried about in a lot of ways. And add on to the fact that as of right now, during this recording, Carolina doesn't have any more scholarships to offer right now to pass out to anybody else. So this is a team that, as of right now, unless someone else leaves, which could happen, I can't rule that out, doesn't really have the power to add anybody else in here, maybe from the transfer portal or something like that. So replacing Manek is going to have to be something this team does with what they already have. And I think they have some guys that could potentially do it. You could throw potentially Puff down there. I know Dontrez Styles is a guy that kind of came on and showed what he can do, a little bit taller guy as well. And Tyler Nickel. And I have a theory about Tyler Nickel we'll talk about in a little bit that I want to see what you think about. But in terms of replacing Brady Manek, just how important was he to last year's teams? Because a lot of Carolina fans that kind of stick him atop the list of he was the reason that we were able to make that deep run because of his playing style and what he was able to do for everybody else on the court. So how important was he for last year's team? And do you think it's going to be difficult to replace him, or can Carolina maybe do that with what they already have on the roster?
Brady Manek was huge because so much of this team was about chemistry. And it took Hubert Davis and the team a while to get it together. I mean, they're 70 to 75% into the season before they really got it clicking and pushed the right buttons. I said this throughout the year. I thought earlier in the year North Carolina could have a really good team because the roster was good, but they complemented each other. So you've got Bacot, who's just a space eater inside. Nobody can handle him one-on-one. Well, what's the perfect complement to that? Well, what about a stretch four who makes it impossible to double from the other post and is just a prolific three-point shooter that can play and that can create room inside? But what he can also do, because of that shooting, is create space for your guards. Like we said, Caleb Love needs space. RJ Davis needs space. Not as much as Caleb, I don't think, but I still think those guys are kind of drive-centric. They like to stretch it out. So they were big. Just him being able to be such a shooter outside was huge as far as making shots, obviously, big shots that impacted and won games. But it let other guys, like I said, play in space to really have the offensive style that they're comfortable with. So, to me, that's what he brought. I thought that was just a perfect amalgamation of talent and skill sets in that starting five.
Mm-hmm. I think so, too. I think he was extremely important. And when you look at the fact that Carolina, as of right now, can't bring anybody else in, they have what they have right now. Do you think there's a guy from what you saw watching this team last year that could maybe not step into that role immediately and just be that guy as prolific as Brady Manek was? But let's not forget, it took Brady Manek some time to kind of grow into his role at North Carolina last season. It wasn't like he just came in for day one and just hit threes all the time. I know there was a little bit of a kind of a balancing act, for lack of a better word, that had to be worked out between Dawson Garcia and Brady Manek. It seemed like they just couldn't play at the same time together. Then you took that out when Dawson Garcia decided to leave the program. Brady Manek just kind of shot off after that and looked so much better out there. And that's when you really saw Carolina and Hubert Davis shut down the rotation completely. It was kind of when the term, Iron Five at Carolina was kind of coined. So do you think there's a guy, maybe Dontrez Styles, Puff Johnson, it's Tyler Nickel, that could maybe come in? Because my X factor, my theory, David, I don't know, we'll see what you agree with this. We'll hit on this a little bit later. I'll save that for a little bit later. But do you think with what Carolina has right now, they could maybe somebody that could come in and maybe perform that role a little bit and maybe grow into being a guy like Brady Manek?
That's going to be the question. That's going to be the $1 million question. With North Carolina is who can solidify that 4 spot. And I think a lot of people want it to be in the style and in the form that Brady Manek played it. So, people are going to be asking which guys can make the 3-pointers and which guys can stretch them. I don't know. There's not going to be another Brady Manek.
No.
And each player's different. But, we're going to see who can play that to a degree. I think it would be great if they could stretch the floor. But here's where the other guys have got to come in. Now, like I said, Caleb Love doesn't have to prove that he can play in traffic to get to the NBA because it's a space league. But I think for the success of North Carolina next year, he's probably going to have to play in traffic a little more, simply because we know Manek's not there. And let's face it, Leaky at the 3 is not going to be a deep ball threat. So there's already one defender that's happening in the paint. So if they can't get the 4 making some shots, then they really kind of pack it in. So that would make it tough on them. But they've got to be able to prove that they can play and make things happen, get the ball inside, score inside, penetrate, take good shots, knock down open jumpers from the perimeter, if they're not getting to stretch out there. Because like I said, it might be a different look. And look, people think because 4 starters back that they can just go and did what they were doing. Hubert kind of got away from as the season went, a lot of the sets, they were running a lot of sets like Roy used to run with a 2-post and things like that, and just slice cuts, followed by the down screens and back screens into the block and all that stuff for feeds. And they started going predominantly with the high ball screen or playing the horn set where they got Manek and Bacot up top. One, Bacot sets the screen, rolls to the rim while Manek fills up top. If you help on a roll, he's got the 3. If they come out with Manek, they got the dump inside. Next year, they may have to go back more to the sets if they can't stretch it as well. So, Hubert's got that. The players know that look. So they're going to have to find out what works. But like I said, the big thing is how can these guys coming back, how can they improve? And I think showing that they can play maybe a little bit different style, which I think it's going to be. But, heck, they've been there. They've had a high-level success. They've got experience. They like I said, they're successful at it. So they've got to they may be able to have to adjust and play a different type of game. But at the 4 spot, I don't know who it's going to be. That's going to be interesting. It may be like North Carolina question, who's going to be the quarterback? Well, in basketball, it may be who's going to be the 4, who's going to be the power forward, who's going to place Manek. I know this. I talked to Puff Johnson's high school coach, and he's adamant that Puff he still doesn't believe Puff was healthy this year, that he could come in and do that, and he can shoot the ball, and he can score out there, and he can bring some of that. Styles is different. Styles doesn't look to me like an outside shooter, but he's a tremendous athlete. You got to remember, like I said, you got to be careful with Leaky on the floor, that they don't have too many non-shooters. So that's going to be an issue. Tyler Nickel, what does he bring? Can he be ready next year? And then, you've got or transfer from Virginia. So, they've got several options to play that. So it's going to be interesting. Jalen Washington, forgot about him coming off the team. So they've got a lot of options, a ton of options. So, but having options and it working is 2 different things. So, that's going to be the thing everybody looks for.
Yeah, David, I've got a theory that I came up with about 48 hours ago. Can't really give myself any more credit than that. That Tyler Nickel could potentially be, I'm not going to say X factor, but a guy that could slide into that role. He's not going to be nearly as prolific. He's a freshman at Carolina. He's a guy that's got to improve. He's not going to be Brady Manek. Like, I love what you said earlier. Like, they're not going to replace Brady Manek. I mean, they just can't do it. It's going to be very hard to do that in terms of what he brought to that team. I agree with what you said about this being kind of it was just a perfect kind of storm of talent and skill sets that really worked out on last year's team as they grew into it. But when you look at Tyler Nickel, and I want to explore this theory a little bit with you because you obviously have seen his game more than I have as being our director of recruiting, but 6'8", all-time leading scorer in Virginia high school basketball history. He's a guy that looks physically like he could play. He doesn't look like a guy that is, to me, and what I've seen so far, he's obviously going to need some time in the weight room, but he doesn't look like a guy who's just too small to play at this level, at that size. He's a pretty built kid. He's a pretty strong kid. And what I really like about him, too, is he plays with an attitude. He's got this little bit of a chip on his shoulder kind of mentality to him. And Manek kind of had that, too. Manek was a guy that played with a lot of energy, got very into games, showed it on his face and with how he played. And I just looked at those 2 guys and I said, okay, you got a true freshman and Nickel coming in. You got a 5th-year senior Manek. So you're not going to get that exact kind of correlation. You probably not even get half of it. You're extremely lucky if you were. But could Nickel maybe slide in and be a guy that provides that outside shooting? And one thing I think he has that maybe Manek didn't have as much is, from what I've seen in his high school tape, Nickel's a guy that loves to take guys off the dribble too. And I know it's always kind of tricky looking at high school tape, especially against some of the competition that I've seen him play against. It's a little bit questionable to say the least, but still he's a guy that's been able to do it on the AAU circuit and in Virginia. If you're the leading scorer in Virginia high school basketball history, you got to be pretty dang good at basketball. So from what you've seen with him, do you think he's maybe a guy that could slide in there and do something and provide at least an outside threat as well of a guy who can go down low and maybe bang a little bit at 6'8"?
Yeah. Last summer when I watched him last July, he was about 6'6". And the first thing I noticed about him was his body. He had a college-ready body then, has a good, strong frame on him. But he was 6'6". You're thinking, okay, he's going to play the 3 and 2. A lot of times are interchangeable. And you're thinking, okay, he's going to be going up against really quick guys at that spot. We'll see how it goes. But then when I heard over the winter that he'd grown to 6'8", I'm like, uh-oh. That could be – those 2 inches could be a total game changer.
Yeah.
Because now you're looking more at a 3-4 type situation and maybe even a 4 where he could really be a tough matchup problem because he can score outside. And the quickness thing, he's not going to be that quick twitch, ultra explosive, but he's pretty daggone athletic.
Mm-hmm.
So, he could really kind of fit in at that 4 spot. So he is a 6'8" Tyler Nickel is much more intriguing than a 6'6" Tyler Nickel. And, that's going to be one of the guys, absolutely, that we'll be watching closely. He's got that strong body, so I think he can guard a 4. Like I said, he just with his skill set, being able to shoot and put the ball on the floor a little bit. I mean, he's going to create some mismatches. So, that's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it'll be even more interesting as he, obviously gets older and grows into an upperclassman at Carolina, because I really do think he has the skill sets to be a really good college basketball player sooner rather than later. All right, David, last thing I kind of want to just hit on, we'll have a little fun at the end. We're going to wrap this up here in a second, but we've already hit on it a little bit. But I just want to ask you, I think when you look at the news with all these guys returning, you look at who Carolina's bringing in freshman class, we'll still kind of wait to see what happens with the rest of the roster throughout the offseason. Things can happen. But, I mean, do you think, is it safe to say that Carolina's a, legitimate national championship? I don't want to say contender. I mean, favorite going. I know it's way too early to say it, but on paper, do you think this is a Carolina team that can make that run again with what it has right now and contend and win a national championship?
Absolutely. I mean, I've looked at, on Twitter, that there have been several established national basketball writers. I saw Andy Katz a while ago, season number 1. And there's a lot of guys that have that. I've not seen anybody. They've been number 1 on several. Like I said, they call them too early preseason.
Yeah, way too early.
And they've been number 1 on several. I haven't seen them below 2 or 3. So I think so. With what all they've got coming back, off the run that they had, and obviously it's a talented team, an experienced team. A team that's had success. And I think that's one thing. It's one thing to be experienced, but to have successful experience is a whole different ball of wax. So, a lot of people are comparing them a little bit to what UCLA was last year coming into this year. Final Four, everybody returning, had some guys that were really made to be good college players. It's a good situation now. It's really Andrew and I talk about it a lot, how quickly things could turn for Hubert Davis, when a lot of people were maybe doubting him early in the season, mid-season. They kept it together. And you look at them making a run all the way to the national championship game, beating Coach K in 2 historic occasions. Last game at Cameron Indoor. And then his very last game in the Final Four, first time Duke and Carolina had ever met. So those were historic wins. It was a historic run. And then, come into next year, you may be preseason number 1. Like you said, definitely going to be preseason top 3, top 5. And then sandwiched in between that could very well get the number 1 player Wednesday in the class of 2023 and Gigi Jackson. So It's just, man, I mean, you talk about, just coming up roses. Hubert's a guy right now you'd want to take to Las Vegas with you. So he, good time to be a Tar Heel fan, definitely.
Yeah, I think it is, man, to say the least. It's last couple of months for Carolina basketball fans has been a heck of a ride. I know, obviously the national championship game was tough, but with everything else going along and just what they've been able to do, you mentioned Gigi Jackson as well, the potential to land him too. I mean, there's a lot of positive things going on across the Carolina basketball program. Good place to wrap this one up, though, David. I appreciate you hopping me on here. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been David Sisk. Enjoyed the conversation. Again, guys, I want to shout out our sponsor on this one real quickly. Again, NIL Fanbox. Just click the link in our description. Use that promo code HEELS22 to save 10% on your Tar Heels fan box. And guys, real quickly too, head on over to TarHeelIllustrated.com. You see it right across there. You can find a link to that in the description too. Head on over there and sign up for just $8.33 a month. David's done a really awesome job covering the GG Jackson recruitment saga, for lack of a better word, and how that's gone on. And if you want to see more about that, you want to hear more about that, want to see kind of what's going on and what we're hearing behind the scenes with that, you got to be signed up. You got to be a member of our premium message board so you can get in there and interact. You can interact and talk with David, Dina, and AJ, and myself as well. So developed a really awesome community over there. If you want to come join, again, just click the link in the description below and sign up over there. It's just $8.33 a month. And what you do over there, what we do over there, the more, income we can get over there, the more we can do on YouTube as well. So it all pays off and all adds up in the end. Again, I've been Jacob Turner. He's been David Sisk. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next one.